Nintendo 64 is one of the most influential gaming systems of all time, bringing Mario into 3D and giving us all-time greats like Smash Bros, Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, and there are so many more all-time classics. I'm your host, as always, KMac Time, and today I have 64 facts about the N64. Now, these first two facts are about my personal N64 collection. I just want to show you guys how big of a fan of the N64 I actually am. I currently own over 20 different N64 systems, and I'm also nearing a complete set of games and own over 200 individual titles. Alright, now into some real facts. The N64 was the last home console to support cartridges instead of CDs. They claimed cartridges were offered graphical advantages, but most believe it was because of a skewed tactic to reduce the cost of their console by about $100. The system launched with only two games available, Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. Howard Lincoln from Nintendo of America at the time said, quote, "We are convinced that a few great games at launch are more important than great games mixed in with a lot of dogs." The system once had a much different name. When the N64 was first shown off to the public in 1994, it was named the Ultra 64. However, due to Konami owning the trademark on Ultra games, they were forced to switch it to the name that we are all now familiar with. The release date had to be pushed back many times, but however, it was eventually released June 23rd, 1996 in the United States, and later in 1997 in Europe. The N64 actually had online connectivity. While it was only made available in Japan, Nintendo ran an online service called RandNet. The service was run through the N64 disk drive, or DD, which also never made its way to the United States. Gamers were able to download demos and compete against each other over the internet. Nintendo, however, shut down the service in the early 2000s. The N64 was also capable of motion controls way before the Wii. There is an adapter that actually lets gamers play the games with motions. I also actually have the adapter, and it's really pretty responsive. It really shines for games like Star Fox and Mario Kart. Nintendo had to spend an estimated $80 million to supply protective gloves for Mario Party players. Gamers were reporting blisters and burns from trying to mash the analog stick while playing Mario Party. Nintendo then had to supply a protective glove for anyone who sent in to remedy the problem. The developers of 007 GoldenEye actually had no idea what the N64 was capable of during the development of the game. Because Nintendo hadn't finalized the design of the N64, GoldenEye's developers had to estimate the power of the console while they were developing the game. Because of this, they were unexpectedly forced to cut the texture quality in half when they finalized the game for the N64. Though past Nintendo systems had vast game libraries, the N64 only had 296 North American titles ever released, compared to the over 1,100 games on the Sony's PlayStation 1. The Red expansion pack gave the system more power to make textures and colors better. Though it was optional for most games and just improved their gameplay, it was necessary for 3 games. You can't play Donkey Kong 64, Perfect Dark, or Majora's Mask without having one. The Nintendo 64 sold just under 40 million units worldwide. Shockingly, over half of those were in North America, and only around 7 million being sold in Japan. Many think it's because the PS1 had way more RPG games that Japanese gamers gravitated towards Sony. The N64 and its controllers came in a wide variety of colors, including the popular see-through Funtastic series, which came in 6 different colors. Donkey Kong 64 is one of the longest to-play games Nintendo has ever made. In fact, the game held a world record for most collectible items. At the end of World War II, South Korea banned Japanese cultural imports, meaning that the N64 was banned in the country. Because of this, it was released by a South Korean company, Hyundai, and was rebranded as the Comboy 64. The final N64 cartridge ever made was Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, and it was released in 2002. Due to delays in the development of the N64, the game Killer Instinct was ported to the Super Nintendo instead of being a launch title for the system as originally planned. Many games started out as disk drive games. Zelda, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Paper Mario all originated as DD games but were later released in cart form. The N64's controller was the first to introduce a Rumble Pack feature. It was also the first controller to use analog sticks since 1983. The N64 cartridges were so much more expensive to produce than Sony's disc-based games, and as a result, they usually cost around $10 more at stores. The N64's processor was 26 times faster than that of the Super Nintendo. It could also produce over 16 million more colors than the SNES. Even though the Mother, or Earthbound as it's known in America, series was so extremely popular, there was not a sequel made for the system. There were rumors that a sequel was in development for the disk drive, but it never saw the light of day. Though some blood remains in games like 007, it was originally planned to have a much more gore. Nintendo had to censor games like Doom and 007, though if you use a Game Shark, you can still see the original blood and gore. A version of Final Fantasy VII was planned to come to the N64, but again, due to memory restrictions of a cart-based game, it was instead only available on PC and the PlayStation 1. Super Mario 64 was the best-selling N64 game, selling over 11 million copies. Mario Kart and 007 were the next highest sellers. Many types of controllers were developed for the system. The Super Pad was supposed to suit the first-person shooters better as its stick layout is closer to modern controllers. There were also racing controllers, fishing pole controllers, fight sticks, and even a smaller version of the original with a joystick moved to the top left. But the weirdest controller had to have been the Nintendo 64 glove controller. This monstrosity did not sell well, so they're hard to come by these days. Nintendo released a few exclusive rental games that are only available to play if rented from a Blockbuster. Games like Razor Freestyle Scooter, NFL Blitz Special Edition, and Transformers Beast Wars were all Blockbuster exclusives. The rarest N64 game ever released was also a Blockbuster exclusive. Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is extremely hard to come by and routinely sells for over $300. That's why I'm super glad that I got my copy years ago. There was going to be a sequel to Mario 64 to be released on the system on the DD. Often referred to as Super Mario 128, a short demo was shown at Space World 2000. Elements of the demo were said to have been implemented into future Mario titles like Super Mario Galaxy. A device similar to the Super Game Boy player, the Wide Boy 64, allows video game players to play Game Boy Color games on the television screen. However, it was only released to developers and the press and was never released to the public. Turok Rage Wars has an alternate gray cart variant that has shot up in value recently. The original carts were black and the game was full of glitches and bugs, and in the co-op mode, it was even worse. You couldn't even finish the game. If a gamer reported this and sent in the original copy to developers, they would send back an updated version in a new gray cart. It is rumored that less than a few thousand even exist. One of Nintendo's biggest franchises, Metroid, never got an installment on the N64. It is the only generation of Nintendo home consoles to not get a Metroid game. Hey You Pikachu was one of the first games to use voice recognition technology. The player could talk into a microphone and give Pikachu commands. The mechanic didn't work very well, however, making the game difficult for gamers, and as a result, it sold extremely poorly. My favorite special edition system of all time is the Pikachu N64. The US version is blue, while the Japanese version is orange. Due to Nintendo buying 49% of the Seattle Mariners, they used their best player, Ken Griffey Jr., as the face of a Nintendo exclusive baseball series on the N64. N64 games are becoming more and more expensive these days. There's been a spike in prices for the system lately. Games like Mario Party 3, Smash Bros, and Conker's Bad Fur Day sell for well over $50 these days. Superman 64 is universally agreed upon as the worst N64 game ever made. It is famous for making players fly through rings while having terrible controls, leading to an overall frustrating experience. Other than the 296 games released in North America, there were also 87 Japan exclusives and 6 PAL region exclusive games. Kart racing games became popular because of the N64. Games like Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, and Mickey's Speedway USA made the genre explode into popularity. Another genre that benefited from the new 3D graphics were wrestling games. Many claim that the system has some of the best wrestling games of all time, including my personal favorite, WWF No Mercy. There are a handful of games ever released on the Nintendo 64 DD. 2 Doshin the Giant games, F-Zero, Mario Artist Series, and SimCity 64 were the only games ever commercially released for it. The F-Zero DD game actually had a track designer mode where players could create their own courses and play and share them online with friends. Nintendo Power Magazine used to send out VHS tapes with videos of upcoming games. The most common tapes are for Banjo-Kazooie and Star Fox 64. Nintendo made several N64 branded products outside of gaming. including a 35mm camera and even some headphones. Recently, there has been a boom in modders making their own homemade portable N64 systems. They can be custom designed and are seriously cool. However, they are not cheap. Another accessory for the N64 was the Game Pack, which was used in the Pokemon Stadium games and allowed players to use their Pokemon from the Game Boy carts on the TV in the Pokemon Stadium games. N64 cartridges were the only Nintendo carts ever printed without a top or side label. Because of this, there's been a recent rise in Nintendo collecting. Many people now offer custom labels for sale online. There is also another special edition Golden N64 system and controller. It was a stored exclusive and was only available for a limited time at certain Toys R Us stores. Though most games came in standard gray and black cartridges, some games like Donkey Kong and Rayman 2 and Tony Hawk came in yellow, green, gold, blue, and even red carts. As we saw with the Turok Rage Wars Gray Kart variant, certain colors cart can be more collectible. The boat racing game Hydro Thunder is about a $20 game in a blue cart, but it's a $50 game in a gray cart. The N64's 4-player multiplayer feature revolutionized gaming with friends. Games like 007 and Mario Kart became insanely addicting when playing with friends on the couch. For the release of Donkey Kong 64, Nintendo released a limited edition banana controller. It also came with a Donkey Kong controller sleeve. Speaking of rare controllers, one of the hardest to find is a Silver Millennium 2000 controller. Collectors love this type of item, so it is extremely hard to get your hands on and will cost you a pretty penny these days. Quest 64 and Paper Mario were among the few RPGs released on the system. Though games like Harvest Moon and Gauntlet Legends did make it into the N64, most RPGs like Final Fantasy went to a disc-based format and were exclusive to the PlayStation. A prototype of the original Super Smash Bros. Was called Dragon King the Fighting Game and did not feature any Nintendo characters. Though Nintendo usually tries to stay away from mature rated games, they did release over 20 of them for the Nintendo 64. Games like Conker's Bad Fur Day and Resident Evil 2 got their rating from their language and mature violence. In 1994, when showing off a tech demo of what was then called Project Reality, or the Ultra 64 as it was then named, Nintendo lied and showed off gameplay that was running on a much more powerful arcade-type machine. They showed Cruising USA, and when the game was eventually ported to the N64 hardware, it ran with way less frames and way less detailed textures than what was originally showed off back in 1994. The iQue was a Nintendo 64 spin-off system marketed and released only in China. It was a plug-and-play system where players could download games onto a cart. This was done again because China had banned the import of Japanese games. And our final fact is that the Blues Brothers 2000 was the lowest rated game ever released on the system, even worse than that of Superman 64. It got, like I said, got a 32% from IGN, mostly due to the fact that the game came out a full 2 years than the movie it was based on, and no one really wanted this game to be made in the first place, and on top of that, it was just awful. But there you guys go, 64 awesome facts about one of the best gaming systems of all time. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button, as it really helps me out when you guys like and share my videos. Let's try and hit that 500 like mark. I'd really appreciate it if you guys could do that. Also, if this is your first time on the channel, make sure to subscribe for more fact videos just like this in your sub boxes. Also, let me know what your favorite N64 games of all time are. Mine are personally Smash Bros, Mario Kart, and all the Mario parties, and maybe even Star Fox. But until next time, guys, remember that's always KMAC time somewhere. So take it easy. And peace out.